Can we just spend a few moments before this video begins to appreciate how drop-dead gorgeous this ship is? The Dramiel has long been one of my favourite hulls in general, just because of those sleek curves and the aggressive spikes to it. It looks fast, it looks brutal, it looks evil, and when you put the Sariel's flame skin on it, oh boy, that just cranks it up to 13 on the badassitude scale. Yeah, I know I sound like Torg there. Anyway folks, why am I showcasing the Sariel's Flames dramiel at the beginning of this video? Well, quite simple really. I wanted to showcase it and just show it off because it's beautiful, but also because I've been fitting a dramiel recently to try and do some abyssal dead spaces, maybe even go into some agent missions or things like the different epic arcs, just to have fun flying this ship. And while I was trying to fit it, I kind of looked at a lot of different modules, and it took me a while sometimes to figure out which of those modules I should be using. So, ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie, and in today's video we're going to be going over the comparison tool, a tiny little tool hidden away in your Neocom that is one of the most useful little things you may find when it comes to learning how to fit your ship. If you do enjoy this video, please spend a second just to hit like on it, as it really does help the channel out, and subscribe for more EVE Online content if you haven't already. Otherwise, let's jump right in. So first of all then, let's open up the fitting window, and please don't tell me that my dramiel fit is awful. I really don't care. This is for the purposes of this video, and it's me playing around with different ideas about how I want to fit this chip in order to complete the content I want to complete. Again, go watch my video on the biggest lie in EVE Online and you'll understand why I get aggro at that. Anyway, let's now go into the Neocom menu. This is the button at the very top left here, and then if we come down to utilities, we have the compare tool. Open this up, move it off to the side somewhere where we can drag stuff into it nice and easily. Because as I was looking at the dramiel, I decided that I really needed to pull up the electromagnetic resistance on the shields so that I could better survive some of the incoming damage if I was getting hit. And I found that I had both a compact EM shield amplifier, I actually somehow had managed to get a basic EM shield amplifier, and I have some EM shield amplifiers too. So, what was the difference between these? Which one is going to be better for the ship that I'm flying? Well, I can sit here and I can right click and go show info and try to read up as much about these as I can, but that's going to require a load of mental gymnastics and memory that I just simply don't have, and that's where the compare tool comes in. So let's grab that EM shield amplifier 2 and drag it in. Let's grab the basic EM shield amplifier and drag that in, and let's grab the compact EM shield amplifier and drag that in too. We're going to close the fitting window now to get a little bit more space, drag all of this in so that we can just focus on what we're looking at. Now, by default, when you drag items into the compare tool, it will compare their name, their media group, and their estimated price. So let's sort by estimated price first of all, because that should tell us whether or not one of these modules is going to be worth it, right? But it doesn't tell us what the modules do so far. That's what all of the menu items on the left here are. We can now go into these and have a look at how these are going to actually work. Now, because these are shield amplifiers, I know, and they're electromagnetic shield amplifiers at that, I know that things like shield hit point bonuses aren't important. Explosive damage resistance isn't going to be important. If I toggle it on, you can see it's 0% across the board for all of them, so I can just toggle it straight back off again, because there's nothing to compare, right? If there's no difference, we don't care. But if I were to look at EM damage resistance on the other hand, that you can suddenly see there is a big difference going on here. They are giving different amounts of EM damage resistance. And if we were to just sort by that, you can see that the EM shield amplifier 2, which kind of makes sense because it's the one that's hardest to skill into, gives the biggest bonus, whereas the basic actually gives the least, despite the fact that it's 73 million ISK comparative to the other two. So why on earth would you use this? Well, let's have a look a bit further before we just sit there and go the basic EM shield's absolute crap. Let's look at power grid usage for starters, and CPU usage in teraflops. That might be why. Because the basic only uses 6 teraflops of CPU and 0 megawatts of power grid usage, whereas the Shield Amplifier 2 uses 30 teraflops of CPU usage and 1 megawatt of power grid. Now, the 1 megawatt of power grid isn't huge, but that's a big difference in your teraflops right there. And okay, the compact uses slightly less, but it's still a lot more than the basic. So now we're armed with this information, I can go into the fitting menu. And for me, I can sit there and look at these items and say, right, okay, well the EM Shield Amplifier 2 is absolutely the best. So let's unfit this and put that EM Shield Amplifier 2 in there. Just got to find it on the list. There it is, Electromagnetic Shield Amplifier 2. Oh, it doesn't fit. There's insufficient CPU. We don't have the teraflops required to run it. But I can see that of the 30, I've only got 26.38. Now, I can look at the tool here and I can see that actually the second best one is still going to fit. So I can unfit that one, and then if we find that compact electromagnetic shield amplifier, there it is, we can drag that in. And oh look, that fits. The teraflops fill right the way up, so we are close to maxing out up here, but for the time being, that's worked perfectly. Ultimately, this means that if you didn't have much CPU left, you could at least possibly fit the basic EM Shield amplifier in there, because it only takes up those 6 teraflops of units rather than the full 20 or 30 that the others use. That gives you a nice idea of what to expect. The comparison tool is also really useful when it comes to things like ammunition. So let's open up that compare tool again. We're going to open up my inventory in this ship, and I'm going to drag all 4 types of ammunition that I have into this window. Again, we're going to move that nice and central so we can see everything. Now here you can see we have defaulted again with the different name types and meta groups. I've turned off estimated price because there's not that much difference. Yeah, okay, the Nuclear S is actually ridiculously cheap at the moment, but for the most part, the cost is kind of negligible. Instead, we want to know what makes these ammunition types actually different to each other, why you would use one in different situations. And again, I could just right-click them and go show info and try and memorize it all, or I can come here to the compare tool. Let's add electromagnetic damage, explosive damage, kinetic damage, and thermal damage as well, so we can now see our damage spreads across the board here. Ultimately, that gives us an idea already of how these ammunition types work, but it's worth also having a look at range bonus and tracking speed multiplier, because now you can see there's a lot more to this than just having different damage profiles. Here we can see that the EMP ammo, most of its damage comes through electromagnetic damage, a bit of explosive at the end, but not much, and really not much kinetic at all. This is primarily electromagnetic damage, very good against opponents that are using shields. Fusion, on the other hand, is completely the other way around. No electromagnetic at all, with a lot in explosive and a bit in kinetic as well. This is brilliant against armor tank foes because that will just punch through their armor resistances. Nuclear, if we come down and ignore that for a moment, actually, let's have a look instead at phased plasma. Phased plasma is a bit more of a weird one in that it's got no electromagnetic damage or explosive damage. It's entirely in thermal with a little bit of kinetic in there as well. Useful if you think you're going up against someone who is shield tanked, but maybe has like high resistances to electromagnetic damage. Again, remember, rats in EVE Online have different resistance profiles, and so equipping the right ammo for the rats that you are using, that you're facing, is always going to be really useful, and this is going to teach you just how to memorize that. It's also worth noting here that you can see all of these have a range bonus of minus 50%, which means I do need to get closer to my target in order to use these effectively, because my range is halved when those are equipped. On the other hand, if I was using the nuclear small ammunition here, that actually gives me a bonus to my range. It increases the range by 60%, but that does come at the cost of tracking speed. Ultimately, that means I get more range, but slightly worse tracking across the board. But again, the damage here is 4 and 1, so it's a lot lower damage. I'm getting better range, but less damage from that ammunition than I would be if I were using, say, I mean, you can see here, it's 4 and 1, so it's 5 total damage. Compare that, for example, here to the EMP-S, the total across the board there is actually going to be 12. Same here, 12 with the Fusion S, and 12 here with the phased plasma compared to 5. It's 50% of the damage, but that's because we're getting that range bonus rather than a range negative. And this does give you the ability to play around with the different ammo types and start to memorize which ones do what. And that is the comparison tool, a nice short video to show you a really simple tool that a surprising amount of players don't even know exists, yet I find this absolutely vital in finding the best modules for a particular situation in EVE Online. Very useful for ammunition, very useful if you're trying to figure out the differences between different types of modules, especially if you've come across from games like EVE Echoes. It's worth noting that there is actually a difference, for example, between a Caldari Navy shield booster and a Minmatar Republic shield booster. Those do actually have different stats, even if they're the same size. Use the compare tool judiciously. Have a look at different modules and figure out which one is best for the ship you are flying in the situations you wish to fly it. Anyway, folks, hopefully that's been useful to you. If you laughed at this at all, if you enjoyed it, or if you just think that the Sariel's Flame skin is probably one of the best in the entire damn game, hit like on the video, subscribe for more EVE Online content. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!